A Science of Change, podcasting by Gilmore Crosby, social scientist, author, and organization development professional since 1984. Okay, hi, I'm Gil Crosby, and my first guest is my father, Robert P. Crosby, whom I think is perhaps the greatest OD practitioner of all time. He certainly is a fabulous practitioner, at least one of the best. So, Dad, how are you?
I'm doing well, Gil.
And how old are you, Dad?
95, the last time I looked.
95. It's amazing. It's such a blessing that you're still here. Go ahead.
I said it's kind of amazing, yeah.
It is amazing. I'm amazed each day. So not only that, you're still writing and reminding your sons about details about organization development and our family history, and still sharp.
Thank you.
Well, how about starting with a song?
A song?
Sure, any song. You were warming up before.
I love life and I want to live. Drink of life's goodness, taste all it can give. I love life, every moment must count. To glory in its sunshine, revel at its fount. I love life. I want to live. I love life.
Bravo! Okay, maybe that's enough.
Yeah, well, it's been a good interview, Gil.
Indeed. Okay, you rascal. I guess one thing I'd just love to hear is like your story of your OD life. Like some highlights?
Wow. I mean, when you're reaching back the years that I have, it's tough to pick out, certain ones, but I am thinking of some. Yeah. One of my first ones was with Easy Loader boat trailers in Spokane, Washington. They were facing really critical times, of sales were down, and they were having a lot of referrals for the illness and things. I didn't sharpen myself about them for this call, but
that's all right. But it was like people were having to use their medical benefits a lot.
Absolutely. And anyway, we went in and I worked with the board at first, and they had just had one of their young sons, David Thielman, become the executive. And so I worked with the board in a survey feedback process where they identified what they thought were issues. And then we cascaded survey feedback across the whole organization. I'm forgetting exactly how many employees they had. It was not a large firm. I think it was only 150 or so employees, but I could be off by 100 or so on that one. But we cascaded survey feedback group by group, that is, boss and employees, through the whole organization. And we have, available the data of the improvements, including in health and safety, and certainly they regained market share, not just regained it, but they captured it in the next year. So that was a memorable experience, and simply done, I say simply, done by letting people identify the issues they were facing at their level of the work. In other words, hourly workers with their boss, identifying issues they faced, both in terms of clarity about decisions and things like that, but also about availability of tools and equipment and the resources they needed to do the job. And when they identified these and were able to make recommendations and then had follow through, which they did with their management, production just soared and morale. So that's a memorable one for me, always is.
Yeah, and of course, you and I have recently been working on a paper where we talk about how when you have data from people have generated data by answering questions, you have the people that answered the questions actually look at the data and come up with their own solutions. That's really powerful. So that was just not long before I joined you, and which was 1984.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And well, what else? What else would you say were highlights of the OD work you've done?
Well, certainly that early work when you joined also was the same thing. We were able to cascade survey feedback from the top management down to hourly workers and their supervisors. And of course, that's critical. I mean, the people who really know how to improve production are the people that are working at it 8 hours or even more a day. You can't improve production by just pulling management together and having a conversation. You improve it by involving the people who know what's not working. I can remember in the Carnation potato plant where I worked right after Easy Loader that I saw a machine in the corner. And I said to them, "What's that?" They said, "Well, we don't know." It was a huge machine. And turns out that the engineers had ordered it. And I said to the hourly workers, "Well, what's it for?" Again, they didn't know. So what we were able to institute was that from now on, before the engineers would order anything for the hourly workers to use, they would be in consultation with the hourly workers and expected to be responsive to them. There were just so many disconnects prior to our work with them.
That's pretty consistent in many places.
Mm-hmm. It really
especially the hourly workers just getting left out of almost everything.
Exactly, and they're the ones that know what's happening 8 hours a day.
Yeah,
right at the, right down at the core place where work is happening.
Well, grandfather played some role in your concern for hourly workers.
Well, Dad was a steel worker. He would work night shift, so he would come home and wake me up, get me breakfast, and we would talk about his work often. And he would have, when he had a supervisor who wanted to listen to him about what was happening, his morale was really high. But then he would get a new supervisor who didn't listen to any of the steel workers and just tried to supervise, manage without any input. And Dad would be really discouraged because things were going wrong that he knew were going wrong, but nobody seemed to care. Mm-hmm. So I listened to that over the years, and that influenced me a lot. And I realized also how much my dad, as a steel worker, really cared about doing the work that he could be proud of, doing it in a way he could be proud of it. And that very much influenced me. There was no question about it.
Yeah, I think you've passed that on to me, my faith that most people want to do a good job and take a lot of pride in it. And feel really frustrated if there's things in the way and no one's listening.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's yeah. Well, that yeah.
Well, how about saying a little bit about how you got started? I mean, you were right there when really the field of OD was just coming into being.
Yeah, is with the background that I talked about with my dad and all that. When I went to Boston School of Theology, I wanted to study group dynamics, and I had cause to want to learn about that field, mainly because I was doing a lot of outdoor education with small groups, like about 10 kids and a counselor or two, and they needed to know about how the group was functioning. And so I needed to know a lot more in order to train them and help them. So I went to Boston, and to my surprise, I said to the professor, I want a course about group dynamics. And he says, we don't have a course about group dynamics. He said, we have a course in group dynamics. Well, I didn't know what he meant. But what it was the early basic skills training group that had just been invented in the decade before by Kurt Lewin, the godfather or the founder of social psych. Kurt Lewin realized that for people to do social change, they had to understand the dynamics of the group that was trying to do the social change, and so that they could function more intelligently and effectively as a group. And so he helped in the invention of what became known as the T group, the training group, the basic skills training group. It got reduced to T group or training group. And here I was 6 or 7 years after its invention in such a group at Boston. Well, it profoundly affected my career and my life. And even to this day, you and Chris do T groups. You're two of the, there aren't many people that do T groups anymore. There are a couple other groups that also apparently do them, different than we do them. But and what that also involved was I started to read everything in that field, which at that time there weren't a lot of books in that field, but there were a surprising number, maybe I'm going to say 50. And I was in school and I had time to study, and I studied and read and experienced this group and the group dynamic. In a T group, you don't have the usual subject offered to you, so you struggle with that, with the group. You struggle with how decisions are made. You struggle with your own anxiety about not having a clear subject, for instance. And so there's a lot of learnings that take place that just don't take place to the traditional classroom. And so I transferred that to working with organizations, and across the years became, I would say, quite successful. My memoirs, which is available electronically free, I'm happy to send it to people upon request, tells stories chapter after chapter of interventions in large companies, sometimes 2,000 people, where we involved everybody with their boss in one of these groups. And it profoundly affected production, safety, reduction of absenteeism, quality of work, etc. Not just the group, not just the T group, but everything surrounding it, including the survey feedback cascaded and working with groups and people where they were in conflict and helping them resolve that, etc.
And you've even done that internationally and through simultaneous translators.
Oh, absolutely. One of the chapters in my memoirs that I love the most is called T in Ukraine. And it's, of course, not TEA, it's T for training. It's doing one of the training groups in Ukraine, which we did, Patricia and I, my wife, some, 30, 40 years ago. Two of the people who were in the group still communicate with us and claim it was transformational for them. It was quite profound for them. They grew up in an authoritarian society, and here we are basically teaching democracy, not permissiveness, but democracy, where there's clear structures and clarity about authority, clarity about decision making, but where people really do influence the outcomes. And then in Italy, for 2 years at a Alcoa plant that had been purchased. We lived in Venice and worked with the Alcoa plant. It was very satisfying, very exciting, doing the same work. And then we also worked with a software firm that had offices in Scotland and Ireland and Germany and France. And you're right. And then you and Chris have worked internationally with this. We worked in Mexico. You guys had that contract. I don't know who had it, Chris or you, but Chris had it. And then I worked with you quite a bit there in Mexico, and then that spread to a couple other South American countries. So,
of course, we were in Mexico because of our Persian connection. Beza.
That's right. Who was an amazing sponsor and manager. Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, and originally quite upset with you, I think, when he first...
Oh, yeah, we had quite a confrontation. I took him on. He was a brilliant engineer, but he was very dominating and went after people. And so I just, in one of these tea groups, stood up and walked towards him in the circle and took him on. And to this day, in fact, just yesterday, I had an email from him. I mean, which ended up, "Love you." So we established a very profound connection. Once he learned how to be with people, he was just a powerful manager and vice president or whatever role you would have.
That's been a reoccurring theme in your life and now in mine, and always one that's touching, really.
Right. If whoever's hostile toward me, then for me that means I have a good chance to have a great relationship with them. I can remember the first time I met Don Simonik, who was an amazing manager at the Addy, Washington Alcoa plant, which was facing closure. But Don was put there as a new plant manager and was told that by his VP, Rick Rao in Knoxville, that he had to keep me. So when I met Don, as we were shaking hands, he says, "I hate consultants." And, I loved it. I knew right then. In fact, I said to him something like, "Well, that's a great way for us to start." And we indeed developed an incredible relationship, which led to the Addy plant in 2 years being touted by Business Week for 72% productivity gain when they were facing closure. And then he went to the two largest plants in the system, 165 plants, the two largest at Knoxville, and then they added Evansville, Indiana. So he was working two plants in two states as the manager, plant manager. And and we went there then too, along with Tom McCombs, a student of mine who was just a great person, and he really was a great internal person. But Patricia and I went there, and we cascaded the T groups and survey feedback, and again would work cross groups where they were in conflict, not getting what they needed from each other. And within 2 or 3 years, his 2 plants, out of 165 plants again, had the 1/3 of the worldwide profits, and they had been facing closure. So these methods that we use, which are really quite simple, you involve people, and you're clear about authority. You don't deny that supervisors have to make certain decisions and managers, etc. But you involve people and you let them influence the product. That's That's simple and powerful.
It's true, and it's real involvement. It's not just communicating to them after you've decided things. It's
absolutely.
Actually, yeah, right from the get-go, involving them and identifying what's in the way, which they know. They know what's in the way of their work every day, and it may not be the same thing that a consultant would say is important, but it's important. It is important, and it's important to them. And so you mentioned Chris and I with T groups, and of course, just last week we were running T groups in the LEO's certificate program. And the LEO's, the corporate leadership program for Alcoa that was connected to the Leadership Institute of Seattle, was a big part of that story you just told about Don Simonek and his 2 plants. Say a little bit more about LEO's, how you started it, and what do you think it's about?
Well, I had been in Nashville, Tennessee, as director of, among other things, the T groups across the United States. I had 2 roles, but that's the one relevant to this conversation.
And those were in church camps, the T groups?
Well, not just camps. I mean, no, they were in. In fact, the T groups weren't really done a lot in camps. That was my other role. But no, T groups in different conferences.
With clergy.
With clergy, but with lay people too, yeah. Mm-hmm. And cool. Anyway, I was responsible for that. But at times I did integrate it with the camp training. That's for sure. We would be living in a T group, a tippy, and having, as a part of the experience, a T group. It was fascinating.
A teepee.
Well, yeah, a TP. A TIPI is how it's spelled, but it's spelled TEEPEE in also. But
okay.
But yeah, we sued when we get sued tippies, we get TIPIs. Anyway, that's irrelevant here. Yeah, I forget where I was headed with that, but
well, LEO's, you were heading towards the creation of LEO's.
So then when I left Nashville and went to fundamentally ended up in Spokane, I needed some kind of an organization or business, so I invented the Leadership Institute of Spokane. Later it moved to Seattle, conveniently with an S, so it was still LEO's. And and then that was 1969, and in 73, the president of Whitworth said, "Well, why don't you do a grad program here at Whitworth?" there was a longer story behind that, but nevertheless, we started then a graduate program contracted to Whitworth and then later to other universities. But it was a grad program. The average age student was 45, and it became the Leadership Institute of Spokane/Seattle over the years and graduated, I'm sure, 1,500 students. We developed a corporate Alcoa program thanks to Don Simonic, the manager at Addy, when he said to me, I want a graduate program for my people to learn to do what you and Tom McCombs and Patricia know how to do. And at first I thought, well, that's not possible. But immediately I went back to Seattle, and the head of LEOS at that time was Brenda Kerr. And she said, of course. Oh, okay. And she managed it. I mean, to have it happen, managed to make it happen. And then, so we had a corporate program for 15 years, and we graduated hundreds from that, including many, many, many steel workers. And it was amazing to have plant managers, upper-level managers, supervisors, and then steel workers in the same groups, in the same graduate program, giving feedback to each other, learning the project management as we know how to do it, where we go beyond what engineers are taught and help them learn the change processes that have to be involved in a good project management thing. Chris has written intensively in one of his books about, in fact, he has about a 20 or 30 page thing which details how we do our project management work. And we taught that. We taught conflict management. It was profound.
Indeed. One of those graduates is going to be with Chris and I in 2 weeks in Pittsburgh, helping to teach the project planning process. He was an electrician at Warwick, Mark Horswood.
Yeah, he's a good example. And, he's an hourly worker, a union member.
Right. Union steward.
And when we were doing a project at Evansville, I said to them there, well, you got to make Mark the project manager. And they said, what? He's an hourly worker. I said, yeah. He's the one that can do it. He knows how to be the project manager for this. And so they made him that, and it was wildly successful. And it was, they had a great union leader there at that time, and frankly, they had a great manager at that time. Yeah.
Chris and I just taught that same process last week, and I have my notes still from that Tippy in Warwick, the planning process at Warwick. Yeah, it's kind of fun. And Mark's bringing his notes. He carried a notebook with him while he followed up, because a lot of what is important is that hourly workers have accountability for actions, not just managers. And that the project person like Mark, as you know, you designed it, is walking around and checking in to see how they're doing, if they're able to make progress, if there's anything in the way, if they're getting time they need from their own supervisors and so on. So he's got all his notes still from that particular project planning intervention.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
When I started there, the union president, Jess Sharber, who I admired greatly, I walked into a room with, I'm going to say, 80 hourly workers, and Jess Sharber was introducing me, and I can't remember the number of the union there. Let's just say it was 108 or something. But he introduced me to the folks. He said, here, this guy, he's going he's going to lead us. He's a member of 108. He introduced me as a union member there. It was, they knew I wasn't technically, I was, but it just, talk about a leader supporting the consultant. It was just, it was a great moment. Yeah.
That's nice. That's nice. I've been given T-shirts by unions, and I've always worn them with pride.
Wow.
In our, certainly in our role, we want to help create respect for everybody.
All right. Including for the top management.
That's right. That's right. And but not be way overbalanced where we're just trying to help one group, which is usually top management that consultants are trying to help. So top management, if you're just focused on them, expense of everyone else, then they're not going to get what they want anyway, because the whole organization is going to be too conflicted. So, well, look, Dad, this is lovely. And I have a few questions here still on my notes. But just what would you like to say to the world? Here you are, 95. You've seen a lot. What's your advice for the rest of the human race?
Well, that's a pretty big one, but certainly for organization development consultants, my advice is keep it simple. Don't look for some esoteric interventions. Just go in and ask a dozen or so questions that you guys will make available to people who want them. And a dozen questions that get at the heart of the work of each group. Let the people fill it out, score it, let them work the data, let them come up with recommendations, make sure there's follow-through. What happens with these recommendations, and just continual follow-through, so that they get sharpened, maybe new issues get identified, but let the people be mightily involved and be clear with the people, the workers, as well as, of course, the supervisor, that the supervisor has a distinct role on making decisions, but not without significant and important input from the hourly worker. That's foolish to do it without that input. And so, but it's that simple. It doesn't have to be complex.
And those are truly democratic principles.
Indeed, which we're having to struggle with in America today, as well as the world.
And I know one of your passions is how the way we work, the way we teach in schools, the way we raise our children, all of that influences whether people know how to think for themselves and speak up and take responsibility, or whether they're just following someone who's in charge and being either maybe rebellious or submissive to whoever's in charge. Yeah,
right. All of it involves also the let's say the student in a classroom being able to interact with other students, being able to influence what's happening, being able to think for themselves, and also being clear that the teacher is in charge, but not as an authoritarian teacher. And that's sadly missing, at least in studies that two of my great colleagues, Richard Schmuck and Patricia, Richard was of the University of Oregon, and in their study of 75 schools, they found none of them where the children in the classrooms were being taught democratically. They were being taught with authoritarianism, and therefore the children were what was being enhanced was their authoritarian personalities. That is, the need to look for the answers in an authority, and sometimes to look for them so you could rebut them, just ignore them, but nevertheless to look for answers in authority rather than recognizing that many of the answers of life lie within oneself. So it's a struggle. Democracy has to be learned anew in every generation. I know when we would say democracy at first to a business person, they would say, well, you can't be permissive. Well, duh, that's right. That's not democracy. Democracy...
Or you can't vote in a business. Yeah. And that's not what we mean either.
We mean that there's a structure that allows influence, but there's clarity about authority. We don't mean that everybody decides. That's an absurd way to think about it.
Yep. Well, look, and I hope to have Dick as one of my guests soon. You just mentioned Dick Schmuck, and yeah, I gotta. These when your guests are 95, you have to move fast.
Well, Dick's not quite that age.
Good, I think. But also, you mentioned Ukraine earlier, and one of my upcoming guests is a Ukrainian social scientist who's still in Odessa.
Wow.
And one thing she's going to talk about is life in wartime.
Yeah, Edgar Schein lived in Odessa for a while. He was born in Switzerland, but he was Russian Jewish, and of course I had a fascinating and wonderful relationship with him the last few years of his life. But he was he lived in Odessa for a while. Yeah.
Well, you and he certainly have traveled a wonderful path through life.
Indeed.
I think we're getting towards the end here, Papa, of this podcast. And so, is there anything else you'd like to add before perhaps gracing us with one more song? Your fans have been writing in and saying, we need more songs.
I really, I'm just not thinking of anything right now. It's just that in the midst of these very difficult times, we have to allow a place for the singing of angels, said Howard Thurman, my mentor 70-some years ago, the godfather of the civil rights movement. Allow in our hearts some place for the singing of angels so that we can not be overwhelmed by the events of our times. Yeah. Well, as far as a song at the end here, let me see where my voice is now.
You have to sing with the voice you have.
That is Patricia, my fabulous stepmother, who also taught in the corporate leadership program.
That's right. That's who spoke up. And she also...
Say something else.
Say something else, Patricia. You can't hear him. He says, say something else.
Other than...
Say hello.
Say hello.
Oh, like hello.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. She also helped in the training in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course in Italy. And, and besides the corporate graduate program and the graduate program. Yeah, it's amazing. Well, let me see what this is. Life is just a bowl of cherries. Don't take it serious. It's too mysterious. You work, you save, you worry so. You can't take it with you when you go, go, go. So please remember it's the berries. The strongest oak must fall. The sweet things of life to you have been loaned. So how can you lose what you never owned? Yes, life is just a bowl of cherries. So live and love and laugh and love and live and laugh at it all.
Bravo! Magnificent again.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being willing to do this, Father.
My privilege.
And I think that is a wrap for today's podcast, but I might have you back. Even if just for my own purposes, I might want to interview you some more about things like your parents. And, whatever you think I don't know yet.
Okay, Gil. Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. All right, and that is a wrap. Bye. Hey, I appreciate you listening. This, again, is Gil Crosby. And I want you to take advantage of what's available to you. I have many free materials. I am happy to talk to people about their situations, especially if you're trying to create change, either social change or organization change. We have frequent workshops that are available, T group workshops. If you have never been in a T group with us, then don't miss it in your life. Many people have said to me, of all the trainings I've ever received, I got this one 30 years ago, and it's the only one that stuck with me. You're learning from your actual interactions with the other participants and with the faculty. The faculty are walking the same talk that they're teaching of behavioral skills. It's a training workshop. That's what the T stands for. This is done in the spirit of the creation of T groups by Kurt Lewin and his associates. It's for groups. It's for teams. That's how it was originally designed. It is a opportunity to learn about theory and put it directly into practice. Again, the original design, you learn things and then you put them into practice. It was not just all ambiguity, which is how some T groups, most are led today, where the faculty hardly says anything. That's not how this is designed. So join us for that. There's always workshops. There's the Leadership Institute of Seattle, which has certificate programs, a two-year program where you will learn from T groups and learn how to do all the organization development work that my father designed, most of it, and I continue that practice alongside my brother Chris and many other associates. So don't be a stranger. There's a lot going on. It's always changing. So be in touch, and it's on the website, crosbyod.com. I look forward to working with you in your organization or as you pursue things like reducing gun violence and decreasing racism in our society. Whatever your goals are, the social science of Kurt Lewin guides how to achieve those goals in a reliable way. And so that's what I apply and practice every day and invite you to.